You might have heard tell Donald Trump had a rally in Madison Square Garden, and there's all kinds of reaction to it. But let's put it in context of what this rally really was before we get to the ugly stuff that was said in it, stuff that's just, unexcusable. But you didn't get the joke or take the joke, people will tell us. Just hold that thought. We'll get back to that in a minute. Madison Square Garden is important to Donald Trump. Donald Trump, as he pushes 80, his whole world is revolved around New York City. It's essential to who he is as a person. And his universe, as he sees it, very much revolves around New York. So it's a big deal that he got Madison Square Garden for a big rally. Politically, it doesn't make any sense because it's not a swing state. This isn't, Georgia or Michigan or Pennsylvania or Arizona or one of the states that's probably going to decide this thing. Why do it now? Why do it a week before the election? Why have the, Donald Trump grifting all-stars as all the supporting cast for this thing? Why did people like his failed lawyer that got him a conviction, why is she sashaying on the stage to great applause and much fanfare? What was this? Well, you can say it's a regular Trump rally with all the outlandish over-the-top stuff that Trump rallies always do, but there's something else going on here that we need to pay attention to. And no, it doesn't have a direct comparison to the Nazi rally in the 30s that was in Madison Square Garden right before World War II kicked off. Yes, kids, that really happened. Go look it up. And by the way, when the Nazis did that, they had a giant portrait of George Washington as the backdrop. Interesting chunk of history. Things that are different are not the same, though. And no, Donald Trump's rally wasn't just a Nazi rally because they said a lot of really presidential, nasty, ugly stuff there. Let's understand what this rally was. There's no political importance to this. This was strictly a message of self-regard, making everybody feel good in the MAGA movement. They think they're winning. May very well be. They've got an electoral path to do so. They may win. But this was a victory party before the votes are counted is what this was. What this really was for the MAGA folks, Trump kind of, but really this was about the people that have gone into his orbit, that have built their brands and business models and personalities and worldview all the way around exclusively Donald Trump stuff. Why do you have this rally? It's not in a swing state. It's in New York City. It's in the heart of Donald Trump's imagination of what he thinks the world revolves around him and New York. What this really was just a giant middle finger. So much of the Trump stuff isn't really partisanship and ideology and policies and all that, although that gets looped into it. When you really boil it all down, most of the MAGA stuff, and again, not even the Trump stuff, not even the election stuff, talking about the people that like to buy merch and wave flags and that sort of stuff. The core theme of the MAGA movement is us versus them. This is not new. It's been around for all of human history. It's powerful stuff. It works almost every time it's tried, as long as you get the right people to believe the us and the right people to portray the them when you do that equation rhetorically and otherwise. This was a big middle finger to all of them so that they could figure out who the us is. That's all this was. There's no political reason for this. It's just a big victory party. Now, for Trump, this is a big ego stroke. Let's not kid ourselves here. And for all the hangers-on, just in case Donald Trump does lose, they get their big shiny moment in Madison Square Garden, because a lot of them, let's be honest, aren't going to have much of a career after Donald Trump. But this was just a giant middle finger. And then the reason you do the middle finger isn't really to show somebody your middle finger. It's so that you can see the reaction to it. You're showing them something. You're making a big display of, you, up yours. It's a giant middle finger to all of them. For the in-group that is us, to the MAGA people that were in Madison Square Garden that night. Of course, they bring in an insult comic who has a long history of insulting people. That's his job description. And then they'll say, well, of course, he's an insult comedy. You just can't get the joke. Well, yeah, a lot of people don't get the jokes. They don't like that stuff. But that's the other middle finger. Oh, now you're reacting to the middle finger, so you don't have to ask about all the things about, like, why would you show someone your middle finger for no apparently good reason? Thing is, they'll list off the reasons. They'll talk about some policy or the border or Dems or libs or whatever. No, you just decided to show your middle finger to get a reaction. You get an insult comic to get up and insult Puerto Ricans and then say, well, I love him. You just can't get the joke. Well, here's the thing. It's not on us to get the joke. We don't have to get the joke. You told the joke to get a reaction. That's what an insult comic does. And sometimes I enjoy that. I like the old school roast. I don't really like the new ones. But there's a place for that sort of thing. But this was part of a political rally. Now, Donald Trump didn't organize this rally. He didn't pick the speakers. He didn't have anything to do with this. He shows up, does his thing, and leaves. The underlings do all this stuff. And yeah, they purposely decided, let's really pull off the stops and walk right up to the line and push the boundaries as far as we can on what we can and can't get away with, and still go to the media next day and go, see, the media just hates us. You don't get the joke. You don't get the joke. You don't understand. Lighten up. You don't take it seriously. You take us too seriously. See, they play this Calvin ball over and over again and moving the goalposts. Here's the thing. We're on year 9 of this with the Trump show as a political force in America. A week from today, as I record this, is going to be election day. Now, I don't think we'll get the results that night. It'll probably be another day or two at least. Last time it got to Saturday before Pennsylvania got their count. That's when a lot of people think we'll know. So we don't know, but here in a week, we're going to find out this election. Here's the important thing to keep in mind. The MAGA folks in Madison Square Garden, Donald Trump, basically threw a pre-victory party, pulling out all the stops. Madison Square Garden, stuck up the middle fingers, and said, it's us versus them, and we're going to win. Now, of course, the Kamala Harris and Democratic Party all think they're going to win. No matter what happens on Tuesday, just under half of the electorate that went and voted, which is going to be 65, 67, 68, 63% of the population of America, of eligible voters, is going to be disappointed. They're going to lose. Their candidate's going to lose. And for a lot of those folks, what they thought was so is going to turn out to not be so. What they thought their worldview of their candidate winning isn't going to happen. Their thought that there's a lot more of us than there are of them, and you can change that nomenclature to whatever you want, is going to prove to not be true. See, one of the problems with the MAGA movement is when you look at the numbers, well, he got 47% of a 67% turnout. Only about 27% of Americans actually voted for Donald Trump in 2020. And he got more votes in 2020 than he did in 2016 when he won. He's won one election in a decade. And we're having this big victory party in Madison Square Garden. This is the kind of stuff that if he don't win, people are going to look back on and go, what were they doing? But it's entirely consistent with the MAGA movement and Trump himself. 9 years, one electoral win, a lot of noise, a lot of news coverage, because the greatest thing to ever happen to network news coverage and the blogosphere and online outlets and newspapers and everything else, the best thing to ever happen to political news coverage is Donald Trump. He's been the biggest thing for business they've had in decades. Everybody on earth, unless you have some kind of disability of some sort, has two middle fingers. We just all decide how to use them. This particular case, Donald Trump and his political party decided instead of going to Georgia or Michigan or Arizona or somewhere else and having a big to-do, they'd go to New York City and stick them both up and say, it's us versus them and we're going to win. Now, they didn't do a Dean scream, but there was all kinds of craziness that you could point to. But in all the coverage of the craziness, there wasn't any crazy on that stage that should really surprise you. This is the kind of people this thing is attracted for 9 years now. Nothing should surprise you, including a giant rally in Madison Square Garden where things like that are said. And it shouldn't surprise you that the following day they come out and go, well, it's an insult comic. You just don't get the joke. Well, yeah, but we're smart enough to know when you hedge on things. I just wonder, come Tuesday, the people that have two middle fingers but don't show them to people, they just use them to go write in votes and fill in bubbles on election day, which way this thing's going to break. Somebody's going home disappointed. Trump tends to get about 47% of the vote no matter what. Is that going to be enough to win or lose? And if he loses, wonder how that MSG rally looks in hindsight. Wonder how stripping his campaign of all the traditional Republican folks, because they're them, not us, and running them all off. You know, the people in 2016 that actually made that a winning campaign, but then were called rhinos and ran away because they either had enough or couldn't get enough, or the Trump people didn't want them anymore because they weren't down for the cause quite as enough. I wonder if some of this is going to look very different in hindsight. I think it will. And we talk almost every election about the silent majority. Well, I think there's actually going to be a silent majority in this case. Either it's a bunch of people who's going to come out and vote for Trump that won't admit it publicly and he's going to win, or it's a bunch of people who have had enough of Donald Trump, don't talk to pollsters, don't really care about politics. They just want this to not be on their TV for the next 4 years, and they show up in droves, and Kamala Harris will win. I think the election comes down to that. Donald Trump and the MAGA movement has always been about these big moments, the coverage, the Madison Square Garden, bright lights. Who decides it's election? Probably a whole lot of people that we normally don't talk about, talk to, cover in the news media, myself included. I'm guilty of that. They all got middle fingers. They're not showing them off on TV a week before an election as some kind of pre-victory party. They're just going about their business with their hands, keeping busy and not being idle and trying to get on with their lives. You push them hard enough, they might just show them to you right back. And then all the talk in the world about, well, you just don't get the joke or you're just offended or whatever else won't matter as much, because now you're going to be twice defeated. You're going to be sent off to irrelevancy. And then we're going to have this weird little historical footnote of, gee, that was weird. Look what they did in Madison Square Garden that one time.
All the music on Heard Tell is provided under a Creative Content license from monstercat.com.
Somos la máquina.